This week is Parshas Shmini. And Parshas Shmini has in it the details of the laws of consumption, what is considered permissible for a person to eat. Every human being has certain things they're allowed to eat and certain things they're not allowed to eat. Every human being is forbidden to eat the limb of a living animal. They're not allowed to eat the blood of a living animal. These are types of food that are binding on every single human being. And when we think about kosher food, really there is kosher food for non-Jews, meaning to say there's food that is allowed for non-Jews and food that's not allowed for non-Jews. Now, within the special responsibilities of the Jewish people, they were given a certain additional requirements to be careful about what we are going to eat. And we cannot eat food that does not have a cloven hooves and that chew its cud, and the Jewish person cannot eat fish that does not have fins and scales, and there's certain birds that cannot be eaten. There has to be a tradition as to what birds can be eaten, and insects cannot be eaten. And these are all different requirements about the type of animals that are permissible to eat that are described in this week's Torah portion, Parshas Shmini. Now, the last words of the Torah portion say that is necessary for a person lahavdil ben hatami ben hataher ben hachaya hane'acheles ben hachaya asher lo te'echa, that it person needs to be able to distinguish between the impure and the pure, between the animal that is edible, as can be eaten, permissible to eat, and the animal that should not be eaten. Rashi says over there, lahavdil lo bilvad hasheina ela shetehe yedua makir baki behem. It's not enough just to learn it, but you have to become an expert, and you have to be able to instantly recognize, you have to know and internalize and recognize the details, what exactly is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So we see that there's a principle over here of what you have to know, what you're allowed to ingest and what you're not permitted to ingest, because things will be coming at you very, very rapidly. You'll all of a sudden see, can I eat this? Can I not eat this? I need to know exactly all that very, very well, exactly, to be able to distinguish, to be able to differentiate, to be able to do my own work, to be able to understand if something is fit for me to eat. And like I said before, this concept applies to every human being, because they all also have to know this in regards to the animals that they are permitted to eat and the type of food that non-Jews are permitted to eat. So we can see instantly when a person is careful about what they ingest, because the concept of being careful about what we ingest applies across the board. It applies to what we see, what we hear, and what we allow to enter our minds and what we allow to enter our hearts. It's our responsibility to be able to distinguish, to be able to say, this is not something that's going to be good for me. Whether it's food, whether it's drink, whether it's a thought, and whether it's speech, whether it's action, whether it's somebody we're going to see, whether it's somebody we're going to hear, I am responsible to be able to distinguish and differentiate, lahavdil, to make a havdalah between this, what's permissible, and what is good for me, and what is not good for me. And this is what we have to make sure that we educate our children properly in this concept. Interestingly enough, we discussed in one of our previous classes the concept of creating tranquility in our lives. And one of the things that a person could simply do is to turn off their phone. When they come out of their car or come off the train to come home, turn off their phone, and their cell phone does not need to be open and turned on until the next day. We've come to we have to take examination. Why are we allowing influences and ideas and contacts from people all across all 24 hours a day? This is something where we're not making a proper distinction between what we're supposed to be focused on now and what we're actually focused on. And then that is actually invading and deteriorating the fabric of our own lives and the fabric of our family lives, the fabric of our children's lives, and the fabric of our communities. So that's just one example of what we need to be conscious of. Now, I want to give you another example of making distinctions and being able to clarify and see for yourself what is really for your best interest. So here's a quote I want to read to you. Control of the Western mind is to be achieved not only by means of the dishonest use of language, but also through operations to demoralize the West, through corrosive attacks on society's institutions, the active promotion of drug abuse, and the spread of agnosticism, nihilism, permissiveness, and concerted attacks on the family in order to destabilize society. Now, you might say to yourself, one second, this sounds horrible. We're going to do everything possible to prevent this from happening. Let's read further. Religion and the traditional culture and moral hegemony must first be destroyed before the revolution can be successful. A message stated unequivocally by the American activist Ellen Willis, who has written that, quote, feminism is not just an issue or group of issues. It is the cutting edge of a revolution in cultural or moral values. The objective of every feminist reform, from legal abortion to child care programs, is to undermine traditional family values, end quote. Now, what we could see from this, and you could send me an email if you like, at info@rabbismith.org if you'd like the full quote and the source for that. But here's the point I want to bring to your attention. It's clear when you read this, when you study the whole concept, what we just learned now in the Gate of Oneness from the Mittler Rebbe, that a child needs to be by his mother until the age of 5, 6 years old. That is how a child learns to be able to function in the world. Instead, people now consider it obligatory for women to leave their homes and turn over the children to child care services. Those child care services cannot possibly substitute. Anyone who thinks that they possibly substitute doesn't understand what we just learned in Shar Yichud from the Mittler Rebbe, that it's necessary for the child to be attached to his mother until that age. Now, what is happening is the absurdity of the situation, the tragedy of the situation is that not only people have allowed this idea to infiltrate into their minds, but now they clamor for universal pre-K. They think it's a good thing that the government is now going to pay to have their children taken from their houses, taken from their mothers at a very early age, to be then run through the system from a very, very early age, which you have to understand something. This actually is a detriment to the child. An educator told me that this educator said that she can actually walk down the halls of the school, elementary school, a girls' school, and she could see on the children's faces which children their mothers are at home and which children their mothers are not at home, just from looking at the children. So this is something that has a tremendous effect. So how do we get to a situation that a parent would be tremendously offended at the idea that the government is going to cut off the free preschool and the free childcare, and then they're going to be agitated by that and demand their rights to have free childcare and free pre-care, is something because we have not used the proper Havdalah to be able to distinguish what's in our best interest and what's not in our best interest. So the government makes taxes at over 50%, if you look at the total taxes, then the income of the husband is not sufficient. Then the wife goes to work, and now the person begins to think that this is normal. And this is really something that should be not only sustained, but it should be encouraged by the payment. And the earlier and earlier, now they're talking about not only kids should have kindergarten, but they should have pre-kindergarten, nursery, and not pre-nursery. And really, they want to get the Marxist idea, as we see in the Marxist structures, and for example, kibbutzim and stuff like that, the children should really be taken in their ideology from the mother right at birth. So this is really what the mothers are volunteering for and the fathers are volunteering for, because they have failed to make a proper havdalah, a proper distinction in what's their best interest. Once you understand this, once you understand that it's something is forbidden for you, it doesn't really matter for you if you say, oh, 1 second, well, this looks like a good piece of food. Life would be easier this way if I had this piece of food. You say, no, I'm not going to eat this. This is not permissible. I'm able to distinguish. I'm immediately able to distinguish and know for myself, not be dependent on other people in the group pressure that's telling me, oh, everyone should go do this. And then you have the rabbi whose wife is really getting money from as an employee there, and you have everyone's getting money from the government programs and so forth, and family members that are getting money from the government programs, and everyone thinks it's a wonderful idea. It looks like a gravy train. But like it says over here, this is really the intention is the destruction of traditional family values and the destruction of the family, God forbid. So how did this get into even the most religious communities, even the most Torah-observing communities? Is only because people failed to make a proper havdalah. They failed to make a proper distinction between what is good for them and what's not good for them. And they look at superficial things and they think, oh, this will be great. More money, free childcare, more income for the family, and they fail to see the big picture. Tragically, innocently, so many people have completely fallen down on this issue, and it's now taking its toll because now parents are dependent on this, and when they come up with mandates to force the children in these programs to comply with the different mandates. Parents are powerless because they have already committed themselves to this ideology, and not realizing that it's intended to really strike at the very core of humanity, because the core of humanity, the core of a nation, is its families. And we need to turn around and say, 1 second here, this is not acceptable. It's not acceptable. We are going to make a havdalah. We are going to decide for ourselves. You do not need to go and ask a question on this subject. You need to know that the entire purpose of taking your children earlier and earlier out of your homes, so the mother has less and less influence on the child, is only and for longer and longer periods of the day, is something that is intended to, God forbid, have detrimental effects, which we can see them in effect right now. And we see that the child's primary influence becomes the school, to the extent that we have the situation that even at the Seder table, when it's supposed to be the father who's supposed to lead the discussion and be the one who's the influencer and who's the one who's providing the direction, the Seder of the Passover Seder is completely overtaken with prepared statements that the children come home to read. This is an example of where the entire foundation of Judaism is actually inverted, turned upside down, and what the school is saying the kids should know becomes the primary influence in their lives rather than the parents. So therefore, we have to make that distinction. We have to take lesson. We have to take heed. And as we see around us greater and greater attempts to distract every human being, and the Jewish people as the first target, and then every human being, to distract them and get them confused and get them to think about all kinds of different things and scenarios that are not real, that are purely manufactured scenarios. It could be there's real casualties, but those scenarios are manufactured in order to knock us off track, to get us into a place of hysteria, into a place of distress, into a place of fear, into a place of making the wrong moves and believing that the wrong things are really in our best interest. That is exactly how, as I read from the quote, the attempt to destabilize good people and to stabilize civilization runs on that basis, and it all stems from a failure to be mavdil, the failure to understand the difference between what is pure and what is impure, the difference between what is permissible and not permissible, the difference between what is good for you and what is not good for you. So therefore, my bracha to everyone is that they should be able to take heart quickly and quickly come to understand and see all these decisions that they've made, and where they find themselves now is based on a series of infiltration of ideas that are foreign ideas against the interest of any human being. And that we can quickly say, no, I will now only proceed according to what is really in the interest of my family, the interest of my children, and the interest of God Almighty's vision for me, for my family, for you, for your family, for our communities, for our nations, and for the world as a whole. And with that, we should celebrate an incredible Shabbos. We should merit to the coming of the redemption of the entire world and the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu right now. Now, just a moment before we are done. You are here because you are like me, not satisfied with the condition of the world and the Jewish people, objecting to the direction that confused people are running in, and intent on seeing God Almighty's vision for the world fulfilled. Torah is a manual for action, and we are taking action. At Rabbismithorg, we have one goal: to connect every man, woman, and child with God Almighty. This is the only way forward, and that includes you. Rabbismith.org has 2 tracks, one for non-Jews and one for Jews. My job is to help point you to the truth, that not only is the divine spark in you bursting out, but you have loving responsibility to those around you, and they will thrive from your clarity and your orientation. Now, join at Rabbismith.org. We have a new initiative starting. We have just started a weekly class, Amunah, Faith in Action, to shepherd our faith and to learn how to shepherd the faith of those around us. Videos, audios, materials, and newsletters. But most importantly, a relationship. The relationship of one person wanting the best for another and taking action to make that happen. At Rabbismith.org, I will be asking you to make a personal undertaking to share what you learn with others and to spread the message of hope to every person, and to make a small daily contribution to support our joint vision and mission. Join us as we get the world on track for Mashiach, for redemption, and make it unfold. Enroll at Rabbismith.org, and I will see you there.